the collapse of thought and the stone of knowledge. There are many teachers, philosophers, and wise men who have spoken words of wisdom. Words themselves can always be repeated. A sentence may be spoken again by another voice, and language can be imitated. But what was expressed through Jesus Christ cannot be reduced to words alone. The difference is not the sentence. The difference is the manifestation. The language spoken in the gospel moves beyond ordinary teaching because it speaks from unity with the Father. At that point, speech becomes symbolic. The words are not merely instruction. They're expressions of something that stands behind the words themselves. Many people can repeat the language. Very few can speak from the ground that produced it. In symbolism, this distinction appears clearly. The name Jesus is the later English form through which the world now knows the man. In the time and place where he lived, he would have been called by a different name in everyday speech. In Hebrew and Aramaic, the name would have sounded closer to Yeshua, a name meaning salvation or God saves. What later generations pronounce as Jesus is a translation that passed through languages across centuries. The historical man lived within time and culture, and his spoken name belonged to that world. Christ refers to something different. Christ is not simply a surname. It comes from the Greek Christos, meaning the anointed one, corresponding to the Hebrew Mashiach, the Messiah. In symbolism, Jesus refers to the man who appeared within history, while Christ refers to the divine principle manifesting through that appearance. The spirit represented by Christ is not confined to 2,000 years ago, nor to 2,000 years before, nor to 2,000 years after. The manifestation of Christ belongs to all time. Because of this, the language surrounding these events is symbolic. The virgin birth is not merely a biological claim, but a symbolic expression of something arising from purity, from an untouched ground. The symbolism points toward manifestation emerging directly from the divine principle. When Christ speaks of unity with the Father, the language is not describing an ordinary relationship. It is expressing realization. It is the manifestation of the divine principle within human awareness. In the Gospel, Jesus speaks in ways that reveal this unity without always stating it directly. I and the Father are one. Gamma Kappa Alpha Pi Alpha Rho Nu Sigma Mu Epsilon Nu. Before Abraham was, I am. Pyro Nu Beta Alpha Mu Gamma Epsilon Nu Sigma Theta Alpha Iota Gamma Epsilon Mu Iota. I am the light of the world. Gamma Epsilon Mu Iota Tau Phi Tau Omicron Kappa Sigma Mu Omicron Upsilon. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Gamma Epsilon Mu Iota Delta Kappa Alpha Lambda Theta Epsilon Iota Alpha Kappa Alpha Zeta Omega. I am the resurrection and the life. Gamma Epsilon Mu Iota Nu Sigma Alpha Sigma Iota Kappa Alpha Zeta Omega. I am the bread of life. Gamma Epsilon Mu Iota Rho Omicron Tau Zeta Omega. I am the good shepherd. Gamma Epsilon Mu Iota Pi Omicron Iota Mu Nu Kappa Alpha Lambda. These statements echo the divine declaration of being itself. This is why the words cannot simply be repeated in the same way by anyone. A sentence can be copied, but the ground from which it arises cannot be imitated without the same clarity, discipline, grounding, purity, and realization that gave rise to it. Language alone does not create that manifestation. Whenever we attempt to speak about the origin, we immediately encounter the same difficulty. It is the source that cannot be called the source. The moment the word source is used, the mind has already turned it into an object of thought. What is being pointed to cannot be captured that way. It cannot be said. And it cannot even be said that it cannot be said. Language folds back upon itself and enters an endless regression, because every attempt to describe it produces another idea instead of the thing itself. This is why the mind begins speaking in paradox. The source and the cause are the same, yet the cause is not the same as the source. Cause and effect are the same, yet effect is not the same as cause. What is being pointed to here is the first uncaused cause arising from that origin which cannot be spoken. The origin gives rise to cause, yet the moment we speak of cause, we have already stepped into relation. When the mind turns toward that origin, something happens. There is a collapse. What cannot be held directly collapses into the movement of mind. From that collapse, thought appears. Thought is not fixed. Thought is movement within the mind itself. It is not yet an object, not yet something that can be held. It is motion, activity, living movement. Thought then turns upon itself. Thinking begins. The mind begins moving within its own activity. Thought reflects upon thought. The movement examines itself, circles itself, and becomes aware of itself. From this turning, thought gives itself up. Thought sacrifices its movement and becomes idea. An idea is thought that has taken form so that it can be held, recognized, and acknowledged. This acknowledgement happens entirely within the self. The mind does not truly see outside itself. What appears to be seen outwardly is always encountered inwardly. The mind believes it is seeing a world outside, yet what it encounters are images appearing within itself. The world appears through imagination. Image in action. Once an idea appears and is acknowledged, it becomes something thought about again. Thought returns to the idea, moves around it, examines it, produces further ideas, and through this process knowledge begins to accumulate. Knowledge is the gathering of ideas. Ideas formed through sense, mood, and tone. These impressions become organized into points of relativity that can be recognized, communicated, and shared. This is why knowledge always consists of relations. The stone we hold in our hand within a dream is a stone of knowledge. Within the dream, it can be examined, described, and discussed. It behaves like a real object within that field of awareness. Yet the stone is not the underlying reality that produced the dream. It is a stone of knowledge. This is why symbolic language becomes necessary when speaking about these things. Direct description collapses what is being pointed toward into concepts, so symbols are used instead. Darkness, light, and water become symbolic ways of speaking about principles. Darkness cannot be seen or grasped. It is depth beyond perception. It is associated with breath and wind, the unseen movement underlying life. This principle appears in the first great pair of traditions, Chinese Taoism on one side and Jewish Kabbalah within Judaism on the other. Both approach the hidden ground from which everything emerges. They stand as two faces of the same coin, different languages pointing toward the same depth. In symbolic terms, this pair can be imagined like the space between the stars and the stars themselves. The unseen field and the visible points of light. In the body, this relation resembles the gray matter of the brain and the living network of the nervous system. The brain appears as a folded mass, almost like a living structure, yet within it flows a vast system of connections. The branching patterns resemble the tree of life described in Kabbalah. The crown above the tree represents the highest point of awareness, and from it descend the pathways through which understanding unfolds. Patterns repeat across levels. Just as the heavens display the 12 constellations of the zodiac, the human body carries 12 cranial nerves and repeating systems of organization. Correspondence appears again and again. Chinese Taoism points toward the unspoken ground, the unity before division. From this unity arises polarity, represented by yin and yang, the interplay through which the 10,000 things emerge. Kabbalah examines the structure of relation within that emergence. The tree of life expresses a living network of connections, much like a nervous system spreading through the body of consciousness. Light and fire represent the appearing of form. Light reveals what can be seen, yet light itself cannot be stared at directly without blindness. Fire and light symbolize illumination, manifestation, and the power through which things become visible. This principle appears in another pair of traditions, Hinduism and Christianity. Each in its own language speaks about the blazing revelation of divine presence, a light so strong that when looked at directly it overwhelms sight. Water represents what is without form. It moves everywhere yet remains shapeless. It fills all spaces and takes on every form while remaining itself unseen. This principle appears in the traditions of Buddhism and Islam. Within the body, this relation can also be understood symbolically. Buddhism corresponds to the living tissue of experience, muscle and flesh, the moving body of sensation and awareness. Islam corresponds to the hidden interior, like bone marrow within the bones, the unseen source that continually generates life from within. Within Islam, the mystical path of Sufism seeks direct experiential knowledge of God through purification of the heart and remembrance of God. These three pairs of traditions form a balanced structure. None stands above the others. None replaces the others. Each expresses a different face of the same unity. What appears in one tradition echoes in another, and every path ultimately returns to the same ground. This balance is essential. No tradition is meant to be lifted above the others, and none is meant to be diminished. Every path reveals part of the same structure. In unity, everyone shares the same origin, and in unity, everyone shares the same dignity. The symbolism of light also reflects this balance. The blazing light can overwhelm sight. The gentler light allows seeing within darkness. What appears to be the greater light can sometimes function like a wolf in sheep's clothing because its intensity blinds the observer. Meanwhile, the quieter light allows perception. Yet, even this distinction returns to unity. The brighter light and the gentler light are not enemies. They are different expressions within the same structure. Within symbolic alchemy, similar relationships appear again. Gold is associated with the sun and represents completion or incorruptibility. Silver corresponds to the moon and represents clarity. Moonlight allows sight within darkness without overwhelming the eye. It reveals shape and form without blinding the observer. In this sense, the symbolism of sun and moon reflects two modes of illumination. Within the triadic structure, repeating relations appear. Patterns such as 3, 6, and 9 emerge as expressions of unity unfolding through relation. Unity becomes relation, relation becomes multiplicity, yet all multiplicity returns again to unity. Across traditions, structured paths also appear. Buddhism speaks of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Judaism preserves the 10 Commandments. Islam teaches the 5 pillars of faith and practice. Mystical traditions express deeper structures within those paths. Kabbalah unfolds the tree of life. Sacred geometry reveals patterns such as the flower of life. Hermetic philosophy expresses the correspondence between the inner and outer worlds. Each point within this structure cannot be separated from the others. Wherever one begins, the path ultimately returns to the same origin. This brings the symbolism back to the stone. The ordinary stone held within a dream is a stone of knowledge. The philosopher's stone represents something deeper. It represents realization. It represents the recognition that the knower, the knowledge, and the thing known arise from the same unity. Hermetic philosophy expresses this insight with the phrase, as above, so below, as within, so without. The patterns that appear in the cosmos also appear within the human mind, because both arise from the same origin. All distinctions arise from the one. All distinctions return to the one. Knowledge forms through the cycle of collapse, thought, thinking, and idea, yet the origin from which everything arises remains beyond what language can fully contain. If I want anything better, it has to start with myself. I look at myself and turn inward to figure out what needs to change. Even if the change is small, let it be a little better than yesterday. You can see it in your imagination first, and then you live it. If anything I ever wanted better than myself, it is a better world. And if the world is going to change, it begins with the man in the mirror. Stop wasting time. Remember the ground, the water, the breath, and the wind. Look at yourself and begin there. Amen. Let it be so.